That's because hypersexuality is not a career. It's not like a sport. It's not like something that you study. Hypersexuality just requires you to objectify yourself. So what Lily was proving essentially was just how little regard she has for her own psychological, emotional, and physical health, because there is just no way that sleeping with 100 men in under 24 hours is something that isn't risky.
You will subscribe to Delululand.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Uhari, and this is Delululand, the place where I talk about delusional people, entities, things, really anything I want to talk about, because this is what my channel. Today, we are going to be talking about
capitalism.
I think you mean capitalism.
Yeah, capitalism. Everybody capping all the time, right?
We're going to be talking about Lily Phillips. She is an OnlyFans model and prolific porn star. Lily Phillips is part of a documentary from a creator by the name of Josh Peters. This documentary is called I Slept with 100 Men in One Day. The documentary itself is so well done. The documentarian is so empathetic. He really cares about his subject matter. And his commentary is also very well thought out. And he challenges some of her notions. And it was quite interesting to see. It was nice to see the empathetic way he treated her. There was no judgment involved in this documentary. It was just information. So I highly recommend that if you haven't seen it, you watch the documentary. It's a real good watch, and as somebody who is a fan of independent content creation, a lot of people will be like, oh, you should put it on Netflix or something like that. But I love when creators put their work where everybody can access it and they get the ad revenue over something like Netflix. It's not worth the title. Before I get into the subject matter of today's video, I would like to offer a trigger warning. This video is about somebody who is self-harming using sex. It's not going to be an easy conversation for anybody who has a traumatic relationship with sex and can be triggered by something like this. So if this is something you feel like you are not in the space to see, I implore you, don't watch this and do not watch the documentary. What's happening? This isn't a career. This is not a career. This is the monetization of trauma. So again, if you're not in the mind space, please check out my other videos. This is not the one. Side note, I got sidetracked. Don't you guys just love my earrings? Would you like to order them? You can't. We open with an introduction where we get to know our subject a little bit better. Lily Phillips is, like I said, an OnlyFans content creator. She does hardcore pornography and she puts it online for her own benefit financially. Lily Phillips is an interesting story because the kind of sexual activity that she is voluntarily taking part in and broadcasting is the kind of activity that many people who are sold into sex trafficking are subject to. It is not normal and it is not psychologically healthy to have sex with 100 men in under 24 hours.
I do what I want and I do it because I enjoy it. I think there are obviously some women that maybe go into it because they have to or need the money and stuff like that, or they're kind of coached into it by men. But my personal experience is I've only ever felt empowered by the fact that I'm making money off something that I think guys will do anyway. I mean, I'm like a part of the problem. It's so hard because like doing extreme stuff like this is not normal. Like, and I think then guys are probably going to expect girls to maybe be as strong as me and sleep with this many guys and take it up the ass or do stuff like that that isn't real life sex. It's kind of hard to wrap my head around.
But you do enjoy doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Clean, clean, clean. Man, you capping. Ooh, clean, 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 clean. Ooh, you capping.
For somebody to voluntarily enter into something like this, there has to be something that is wrong. But that's not what Lily wants you to think. See, Lily was not some sex trafficked woman. Lily does not come from abject poverty, from a financial state that would force her into doing this in order to survive. Lily isn't in an abusive relationship where a partner is forcing her to do this. Lily is a college-educated, beautiful woman who chose this path for herself. She started off OnlyFans, and it wasn't extreme in the beginning, but the more money she gets, or rather the more money she got, the more she was incentivized to do a little bit more each time, get more extreme. And the more outrageous and extreme, the more money she got. And Lily became a millionaire off of the self-commodification of her sexuality. So we meet Lily. We learn a bit more about her. We learn about what she does on OnlyFans, not just the pornography, but the personalized videos that she does for people. There's an element of the veneer of emotional intimacy, because the men who are, and not just men, the people who are drawn to creators such as Lily crave access to sex, but they don't get access to sex because they don't have the social skills required to be able to naturally entice a sexual partner. They don't know how to appeal.
What would be the demographic of guy that would recognize you normally?
I'd say more of a, it's going to sound mean, but more like a chubby, younger guy.
And so this commodification of sexuality as it stands now, industry, went from just you can see pictures of these women to you can see videos of these women to now you can talk to these women. And this is as close as people like this get to relationships. And it's a very, very dangerous place to be. Because there's the false assumption that the people who are participating in paying for these services completely understand that it is just within the realm of make-believe. There are many instances of OnlyFans creators and other women who create personalized sexual content for people who pay for it and pretend to have relationships, things such as the girlfriend experience. We've seen many instances of these men acting out in violence against these women because they have a sense of possession and ownership. And the relationship as they perceive it in their heads is very different from reality.
August the 29th, 2021. Janae's father, Mark, had just returned from a fishing trip when he received a worrying phone call from one of his other daughters, London. The family had become aware that Janae hadn't been in contact for several days now, which was odd given that Janae was very close to her family. Furthermore, she was extremely close with her father and would regularly call him to check in on him. The silence extended past the family too, as nobody else had heard from her in the last 3 days. To add to this, she had also failed to post on her social media, and so, given how wildly out of character this was, something had to be wrong. To make matters even worse, Mark realised that the last time he'd spoken to Janae was more than 10 days ago on August the 17th. During this phone call, she had asked her father if he could stay with her while her boyfriend was out of town. Now, this was understandable. Considering all of her negative past experiences, Janae was still inherently scared to live alone. With growing concern, Mark travelled over to her Cortland Sugarland home. With no answer at the door, but her BMW visible from the garage, Mark made the decision to kick the front door down. And sadly, as soon as he did, he was met with a wave of shock and grief. At the bottom of the stairway, he found the lifeless body of his daughter. Her leg was bent behind her body, and her clothes were torn. Blood was found throughout the property in the form of droplets and, in some places, puddles. And exploring other rooms in the home would sadly make the reality even worse. After looking upstairs, Mark found an unrecognisable man clinging to his life on the floor. He had a knife in his chest, which appeared to be self-inflicted. Looking up at the walls, doors and mirrors added another layer of horror to the already unfolding nightmare. This man, who named himself as Kevin Okorto, had left dozens of notes written in lipstick or pens. One note read, "I wish I never loved her." Another, "I should have stayed in Florida." Found on another wall, Kevin wrote, "I was used for money." And on the door nearby, "Sorry to the landlord and the community. I hurt a lot, okay?" Another note read, "Janae led me to think she cared about me, but wore another man's ring." This message indicating another clear and strong motive behind the crime.
A lot of times they're not even speaking to these models, but they have that psychological connection. We're not dealing with healthy people here who understand the parameters of what they're getting into. It's just a bunch of people who think they'll be okay with it, but can't handle it emotionally. Lily shares that characteristic. She thinks she can handle it, but she can't. And so we watch this woman go from giving the appearance of confidence, of excitement, giving the appearance that this is her sexual fantasy. She says that a lot of times people forget that this is my fantasy, this is what I want.
But you do enjoy doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people forget it is my fantasy and this is what I enjoy.
Cling, cling, cling. Man, you capping. Ooh, cling, 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 cling. Oh, you capping.
Lily, throughout the documentary, displays a lot of conflicted speech. She'll say one thing and then contradict herself quickly in order to emotionally shield herself from the reality of her feelings. The biggest example of this is her saying that it is her fantasy and this is what she wants. And then after it happens, when she's talking to the documentarian, she talks about how after a certain number of men, she started to disassociate.
I think sometimes like feeling so like robotic, like by the 30th, you know, like when we're getting on a bit, I've got like a routine of like how we're gonna do this, and like it just, sometimes you'd like disassociate and be like, you know, like it's not like normal sex at all. In my head right now, I can think of like 5, 6 guys, 10 guys that I remember, and that's it. But it's just, I don't know, it's just weird, isn't it? Like, if I didn't have the videos, I wouldn't have known I've done 100, you know? But yeah.
I don't know about you, but whenever I am placed in a situation where my fantasies are coming true, the last thing I do is disassociate. At that point, I participate full mindfulness. It's like when you're eating something delicious and you just want to savor it. You don't even want it to finish because you were craving it. That's the fulfillment of a fantasy. That's what it looks like. Fulfillment of a fantasy does not look like disassociating. So very early on, you realize that you're dealing with somebody who is very delusional. But this particular kind of delusion is less contemptible than the ones that I talk about, like other people who are delusional, because they're trapped in narcissistic delusions, like, say, Amberlynn Reid. The delusion she's under isn't narcissistic. It is self-protective. Now I have to give another disclaimer. I'm not a psychologist. I am not qualified in the field of psychology. I am, however, somebody who is very interested in psychology, who is studying psychology, and who has been in therapy for over 6 years. So I do not have any professional authority, and I'm making that very clear. So nothing I say is factual. It is all just me hypothesizing. I'm not an authority, is what I'm trying to say, in this arena. So everything I say is simply me making connections that I see. But again, this is Delulu land. We're all a little Delulu, and I myself sometimes suffer from delusions. So you can check me on this one. The kind of delusional behavior that Lily displays is akin to watching two siblings, a younger sibling and an older sibling, not too far in age difference. Let's give it between 3 and 5 years. These two siblings are in a home where they're being abused. And the older sibling has developed a very strong protective instinct towards the younger one. So whenever they see instances where the younger one is about to be abused, maybe blamed for something, and they know that if blame is assigned to them, they are going to get punished, they come in and they want to take that punishment. They protect the younger child. Lily's delusion has a similar function. There is a fragility that is being protected by a delusion. The fragility is who Lily really is. And then the delusion is the older sibling. And so what they're doing is protective in intent. But children don't always have all the information. So sometimes what we do in protection is actually harmful. And this delusion is harmful because it's not helping Lily change and heal the fragility. It's helping her delay processing the reality of what has caused this reaction of having to develop a protective mechanism through the delusion. This delusion then manifests itself in hypersexuality. By making sex something that she supposedly enjoys, to the extent of wanting to have sex with 100 men in one day. By doing that, the act of sex is recontextualized as something that she enjoys. In the beginning, she talks about how when she was younger, she wanted to save herself for marriage and that she thought sex was something special. And then she had sex and she realized it wasn't something special and that she liked it and wanted to have a lot of it.
Before I had sex, I was never much for... I actually wanted to wait till marriage at one point. I just used to think it was a real special thing. As soon as I actually didn't have sex, I kind of realised that it wasn't special. And also that I just really loved it and really enjoyed it and that I wanted to do it way more often.
Cling, cling, cling. Man, you capping. Ooh, cling, 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 cling. Oh, you capping.
This, however, is in direct contradiction to her reaction after having the type of sex that she claims to enjoy.
It's not for the weak, girls, if I'm honest. It was hard. I don't know if I'd recommend it.
Why not?
I think if you're a different type of girl, it's very like, it's kind of like being a prostitute in a sense of like, it's just a different feeling. I don't know how to explain it, like...
It's not like just having sex with someone.
Yeah. Just one in, one out, like it feels intense.
Like more intense than you thought it might.
Definitely.
Sorry. Okay. Okay. Just take
Yeah, 1 minute.
Her own reaction to what had happened to her after sleeping with those 100 men was of crying. And those tears are the delusion losing its power, because the reality of the pain is so strong that the body itself has to process it. It can't help but process it. That trauma comes off physically because it's so suppressed. So Lily's attitude coming up to the event, as we'll call it, this record-setting event of having sex with 100 men in under 24 hours. Leading up to it, she is very excited. At the very least, she is able to maintain the veneer of excitement. It is only when the reality of the experience hits her that she is forced into an honest reaction. So there comes the conflicted speech. You'll ask her, how was it? She won't say, this is one of the most traumatic things that have ever happened to me. Instead, she says, I don't think I'd recommend it. It's not for the weak. That's because hypersexuality is not a career. It's not like a sport. It's not like something that you study. Hypersexuality just requires you to objectify yourself. So what Lily was proving essentially was just how little regard she has for her own psychological, emotional, and physical health, because there is just no way that sleeping with 100 men in under 24 hours is something that isn't risky. She used condoms with them, but again, we know condoms aren't 100%. And also she, to those who wanted it, performed oral sex without a condom.
I'll start usually with a club, and then I'd say, like, is there anything you like, don't like, any certain position you want to do?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, we kind of got straight into it.
Did you do the with a condom on, or?
No, I didn't. Condom off.
Okay, and then, but then, like, once they're having sex, and it's like,
yeah,
condom on type thing.
What she gained from all of this was attention and money. Those are the spoils. Attention that she both craves but loathes. Because she talks about the emotional impact of just being objectified. You can tell she's depressed. Money does not solve that. So she gets the attention that she wants but hates at the same time. And then she gets this money. And as nice as it is to have money, to be able to buy things, she's lonely and isolated. And the money doesn't help it She talks about banks not even wanting to bank with her. So what you see is a gorgeous, beautiful, intelligent young woman, self-harm. She's lost something that can't be brought back. You can't unexperience all those sexual encounters with all those different people. But at least she can afford all the therapy in the world. So virginity and sex went from special to not special to enjoying it through hypersexuality and then ending up in the commodification of sex. Her initial attitude before she had sex, before that first encounter, according to her, was that sex was special. And her attitude afterwards towards sex is that it is carnal, non-intimate, and transactional. Men are going to sexualize me anyway. It's like she has no trust in men as a whole.
Like, guys are always going to sexualize me, so I may as well try and profit off that bit.
I mean, not all guys are going to sexualize you.
I don't really know. I think I'm not, maybe not all guys, but a fraction would.
So the initial sexual encounter removed emotion from sex. That's a reaction. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. So what caused this reaction? The removal of emotion from sex for her manifests as disassociation. Disassociation is severing a link between her conscious self and her body, thus making sex something that happens to her rather than something she participates in. That then fed into the transactionalization of sex. If sex is something men do to women, there is no perceived benefit to Lily beyond male gratification. If one internalizes their objectification during sex, it makes sense to want to benefit from your own body. Because at that point, your body exists as a vessel of pleasure for another. And if you can't derive pleasure, you might as well derive money. Monopolization of objectification provides the veneer of self-empowerment as the person now feels that they have reclaimed their bodies. The reality of the financial success and empowerment that Lily and a lot of other OnlyFans women display and get. While on the surface, seeing them gain all this money and buy these houses and cars seems like they've benefited and that there is something good by the voluntary objectification of your sexuality. So the monetary benefits may seem to be positive, that something good is happening, that instead of women having these predatory porn agencies use them, take money and all of that, with OnlyFans, women can get the money for themselves, so this is good and it's empowerment. This, however, to me, is an indication that the reactionary attitude to sex has not changed. Sex has an emotional component. Disassociation during sex is self-objectification, which is a response/reaction. Ultimate pleasure from sex is achieved through mindfulness, as the heightened sensory pleasure is amplified by the participants being in tune with each other's needs. People who disassociate during sex do not express needs, they fulfill them, which is why she was crying over not pleasing random men. One of the reasons she was crying after she did this was not just because of the toll it had on her, but because of the psychological strain she was experiencing from not fulfilling the men's pleasure. Somebody made a comment that she promised this 5 minutes or an orgasm and that they didn't get that. And she was crying. Because she disappointed the man.
I guess the interactions when like I'd have to stop them early and like you'd have to stand on business and be like, I'm so sorry, you got to go, and like the awkward interaction of like you feeling pressure to have to make them come if like you haven't spent enough time with them and feeling like they didn't, like you didn't give them a good time because like they only got 2 minutes.
And that's what's making you feel emotional, is that maybe you think you didn't give some guys a good enough time today?
Yeah, and it's hard, I think, having the interactions with them when they're like, what, you're not going to make me finish, I've come all this way, like kind of like guilt tripping me a little bit. I felt bad, like some people just travel so far, like I didn't want to give them a shit time and like come away from this and be like, oh, that was shit.
That shows that her attitude towards sex is that it is for pleasing men, that her sexuality is not her own and the pleasure for herself. Instead, it's for benefiting men. So it's okay for her to traumatize herself through sex if she is making money off of it. That's what she says. She says they're already going to sexualize me anyway. That means that to her, sex is already something that's not good. Essentially, there is an undertone of sex is always traumatic. So why not make money off of that trauma? Otherwise, why am I doing it? This transactional and non-emotional conception of sex leads to an inability to sustain healthy romantic relationships, because relationships require intimacy. And somebody who is disassociative cannot be intimate, because intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires mindfulness. It requires being in the room. And if you need something to distract you from the fact that you're in the room, you have a dysfunctional relationship with sex. And that is something that needs healing. Until you stop viewing yourself as a sexual object, you will remain one. Essentially, they do not benefit from hypersexuality and the commodification of sex. It's a trauma response, not a career. If the initial conception of sex being special wasn't altered, they would not be vulnerable to self-sexual commodification, because their sexuality and body exists to pleasure them and serve them. They therefore identify with their character, not other people's interpretation of who they are. If sex is disassociative, it is not for the benefit of the self, but of the other. Sexuality therefore belongs to the other. That is the truth of the self-commodification of sex. It is, plainly put, self-harm. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for watching my video. If you made it this far, you are a superstar. Please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you do subscribe, please put the notification bell on. And if you didn't enjoy it, please tell me why. And if you don't want to type a comment, just dislike it. Please, please, please take care of yourself. And remember that sex, it is special. Don't let anybody tell you any different.